Welcome to the second video of Module 1, Unit 2, Communicative Language Teaching. In the first video on this unit, we have had a look at the two different methods of ESL teaching. First was the grammar translation method and second was the direct method. Now in this video, we'll have a look at the structural oral situational method and the audio-lingual method. The structural oral situational method is one of the methods that we use in English language classrooms. This method is based on the principle that language is primarily speech. So speech is where the focus will be on in this method. Thus, the structure and vocabulary should be first practiced orally and then through reading and writing. So the primary input would be speech, or oral input would be the primary, and then we'd have reading and writing. Practice is an essential part of this method. We'll see more about how practice works in this method as we see the process of this method. Language is presented in a meaningful situation so that the meaning and context can be deduced without using the mother tongue. So just as it was in the direct method, here also they are trying the best to avoid the use of mother tongue. And in this method, the language is presented in a meaningful situation or in a familiar situation. A situation which would be familiar to the learners so that they can relate to the situation and learn the language better. Let's see the process of this method. At first, the teacher will mouth the words. They will whisper or rather mouth the words, and by seeing the action of the teacher, the learners will then try to imitate the teacher. This will happen repeatedly and there would be continuous feedback and correction from the teacher. So that is the process. This process would be ongoing. The teacher would elicit a response or a dialogue and then the learners would imitate the teacher. So continuous practice would be there and continuous feedback and correction would be there from the side of the teacher. Practice by the learners and correction and feedback by the teacher. In this method, all the four skills are aimed. The four skills of listening, reading, speaking, and writing. This method aims to improve all the four methods. And as we have seen how the process goes, we know that the teacher is an integral part of the method or the process, and thus obviously this method is teacher centered. And it is also an inductive method. Inductive, as we have seen in direct method. We'll proceed from examples to rules. The teacher would first give the students examples from which the students will try to infer the rules. So this is the structural, oral, and situational method. The second method that we will see in this video is the audio-lingual method. This method is also called the army method. Why is that so? Because it was used in the US Army. This method of audio-lingual is used or was used in the US Army to train the young soldiers spoken English. So this method was used to train the soldiers. In this, the teacher presents an oral model to the learner and drills are carried out based on the model. For example, the teacher might say a word or a phrase called carry out. The teacher would say the word or the phrase carry out first, and then they'll make the young soldiers or the learners to repeat or drill and practice it after the teacher. This will happen with all the other components of language, be it phoneme, morpheme, phrases, clauses, sentences. So through this method, the learners will learn how the elements of language are combined structurally. This is based on the behaviorist theory. And the behaviorist theory advocates a system of reinforcement. What is reinforcement? When we say something and we repeat it again, we repeat it and repeat it, then that is called reinforcement. This method, as we have seen, there is a lot of practice involved, a lot of drilling involved in this method, and thus it encourages a system of reinforcement. In this, the rules of grammar are not given, and it is based on, as I have told, drilling, and thus mimicry, memorization, and pattern drills are used in the progress all throughout the process of the audiolingual method. The teacher would say something, the learners would repeat it, the teacher would say something else and the learners would repeat that. So this will go on and on. And thus in this method, error prevention is encouraged, which is clear for us. Why? Because if we are attempting to do something on our own, there are high chances that we'll make mistakes, but through those mistakes we'll learn. But in the audiolingual method, since we are mimicking or imitating the teacher, there are less chances of making errors. So errors are not much tolerated in this method of the audiolingual teaching. I have told that it is based on the behaviorist theory, that is about the system of reinforcement, habit formation. So as we mimic, as we practice something, that's how habits are formed, right? So it encourages habit formation, habituation and conditioning. Now let's see what will happen in a classroom where the audiolingual method is practiced. At first, the learners are made to listen to a dialogue. It could be by the teacher or using some electronic sources. So first the learners will listen to a dialogue. Then there would be individual and choral repetition. Maybe a learner would alone be repeating the dialogue which he or she has heard. And at times, the group, the whole class would chorally be repeating the dialogue. What is the function of the teacher here? The teacher would be eliciting the dialogue, or the teacher would introduce the dialogue. Then the teacher would take care of the pronunciation, intonation, and fluency, and other aspects of language as well. In this method, the teacher would give correction as soon as a mistake is committed, because we have seen that this method encourages or motivates error prevention. And thus, as soon as the learner commits a mistake, the teacher will interfere, the teacher will intervene and correct the mistake then and there. In this process, memorization is also involved. The dialogue which the learner listens to will be memorized at times, and will be practiced again and again. Practice and more practice. That's what this method is all about. Imitation, practice, habituation, conditioning, memorization. One of the main objectives of this method is accurate pronunciation. And a drawback which we can see about this method is that the students couldn't transform or transfer the skills that they have learnt within the class outside the classroom. It's true that they listen to a number of different dialogues in the classroom, but when they have to face a real life situation, they might not be prepared for that because they have memorized or practiced only a certain set of dialogues, and thus they are not flexible with the structure of the language. So that is one of the major drawbacks of this method, that the students couldn't transfer the skills outside the classroom. In this method, we know stimulus would be there, response, and then reinforcement. Stimulus would be in the form of dialogue or any such oral input. Then response would be there from the side of the learners. Then that is reinforced through correction would be given, immediate correction would be given, and they'll practice it again and again. In this video, we have come across the two methods of language teaching, the structural oral situational method and the audio-lingual method or the ARMY method. I hope the contents and the concept is clear for you. Thank you for listening.